So there is a patent pending on this guy, and essentially this is kind of like a stacked system. So the bottom of the cylinder is the master side, and then the top of the cylinder is the slave side. So as we push down, the hydraulic fluid is compressed. That compressed fluid then causes the slave cylinder to retract. So again, you can't really see it too well on here, but as I push down the pedal, you'll see the back end of the cylinder here is pulling in. So there's a secondary push rod on here, and that is essentially pulling through the cylinder and in, and there's an elastomer insert inside here, which looks like, depending on which setting you go for, so a pretty familiar sight for anybody who's watched any of our more high-end pedal reviews here on the channel. That squishes down as you push on the pedal, and that is what provides the mechanical resistance as you push down the pedal. Of course, remembering there is that spring in the pivot point as well, which does add a little bit of feeling there too. Now, let's have a closer look at exactly how this works quickly. Now, as I touched on before, one of the things that I am really liking about these pedals so far is the toolless design. Very, very easy to make most of the adjustments which are available here. Now, the adjustment for the elastomer here is no exception. One thing that you do just need to be aware of course, is because of the angle that this is sitting at, if you do have these pedals mounted to a plate which extends beyond the back here, you are going to need to remove them from the rig to do the adjustment that we're going to be looking at here now. And you can see right now, as a perfect example, sitting on the table, I can't actually remove that assembly there unless I prop it up. So I'm going to do exactly that right now. Just chuck it up on top of a piece of profile, and I'll show you exactly how easy this is. So similar to what we had on our angle adjustment, we've got a retainer. So we simply remove or loosen our retainer, take that off, and then we loosen the secondary screw here, and you can see the elastomer hiding in behind there. So if I screw that all the way off, there you go. So provided that you aren't blocking access with your pedal plate, it really is that easy. Simply screw this back on, wind it all the way in, and nice and snug up against the elastomer. Now, if you do like to have a little bit of initial uptake in the pedal, you can adjust that in here too. Because we do have that secondary spring here, what you can do is you can back this off away from the elastomer just a little bit, chuck your retention screw in there as well just to bind the thread so it won't move. So we'll wind that on there, lock it in position. So now that's not going to move. And you can see, even though I do have the spring force provided by the spring here, that allows us to simulate that little bit of uptake that you may have in some brake pedals in some cars. So remembering, of course, when you push down the brake pedal in a real car, the brake pads may have a small gap before they start to interface with the rotor, and that allows you to simulate that effect. Now, most race cars, the pads are literally just skimming up against the surface, so they're not creating any significant amount of friction there or slowing you down. But, you know, race car drivers often do like to have a very stiff feel with no vagueness in it whatsoever, which is what this is replicating. But if you do want to have that little bit of initial uptake there, you can adjust that in. So if we were to loosen that off a little bit more, so hold on to the first one, twist the second one, back it off there. So there's that little bit of slack in the elastomer now, and you can see when I push that down, you do feel that little bit of, not slop, because again, we have that secondary spring, but that little bit of uptake there before it bites into position. If you don't like that, all you need to do is just wind that in so it's engaging with the elastomer, wind in your retention screw, and now that little bit of uptake is pretty much gone away. So that's how that works. Now, another important thing to cover here as well is the design of this bell housing, I guess you could call it, which sits off the back of the cylinder here. So with elastomer inserts like what we have here, they do have a maximum amount of deflection which is allowed. In the case of the ones which are provided here, the spec sheet that they've given me here says that up to 10 millimeters of compression is allowable. And what happens once you go past that is they start to deform and they can start to wear out or not perform optimally. Now, what happens is as they start to wear out, obviously that is going to affect the pedal feel. It's going to start to feel looser and looser and softer over time until the point where they ultimately just break down. And we have seen that occur on quite a few pedal sets that we've tested here over time. The original Husingville Ultimate pedals that I had, they were a number of years old when I bought them, but we did have a couple of elastomer failures in those. We've had elastomer failures in the BJ load cell pedals as well that we've tested, as well as the hydraulic pedals. They do use a similar system as well. And the reason for that is quite simply that there's no way of limiting the amount of travel on this. So the harder you push, the more it's compressing, and ultimately it's just going to blow out. Now, we did see a quite clever system used on the Mecha Cup 1 pedals that we reviewed a little while back, using some little metal cups to limit the amount of travel. And this is a similar kind of design to that. So you can imagine as the elastomer is compressing inside the housing here, it's going to reach a point where it hits the outside of the bell housing. And once that happens, it's not going to be able to blow out any further. So effectively what's happening is it's limiting the amount of travel which is available without blowing out those elastomers. So that is something that I'm really happy to see. and I'm sure something that will lead to good longevity. Now, another important thing to cover here as well is the type of fluid that's being used inside the hydraulic cylinder. So they are using a paraffin oil here. Now, the reason I call that out is a lot of hydraulic pedals do use real life brake fluid, which in some cases can be even carcinogenic, but at the very best, it'll stain your carpet, sometimes dissolve paint off things. It's just not something that you want to have laying around your house. It's very toxic. Obviously, it could cause a really bad time if it were to get on your skin or, you know, swallowed or some reason like that. It's not something you want to have around pets or, you know, kids or anything like that. Now, the reason why that kind of fluid is used in real life race cars is obviously because of heat cycling. Under real life conditions, brakes obviously get really, really hot. They have to be able to withstand and maintain their viscosity throughout a wide range of different temperatures, from freezing all the way up to, you know, multiple hundreds, sometimes even thousands of degrees. But on a sim racing set, you obviously don't need that functionality. So something like a mineral oil or paraffin oil is absolutely fine to use. In the case of what they're using here, it's odorless, it's clear as well, so it's not going to stain anything should it leak, and I'm really hoping that we don't see any leaks with this. Yeah, it's definitely the better option to be using, and something that I hope a lot of other companies end up doing. Some of them already have started to adopt similar strategies in their pedals, but we have seen a couple of pedal sets through here that did use the really nasty stuff as well. So definitely a good move by them. Now, just on the subject of leaks as well quickly, and you might have already seen some footage of this that they've shared online. They do extensive testing over time. So they have a couple of rigs that they've actually set up in their workshop, which continuously pushes down on each of the pedals. And they do tell me that they've tested these pedals well over 1 million cycles. So longevity should not be a problem with these. Obviously, we can't comment on it until we've put some hours on it ourselves. And again, remembering that this is a pre-production model. But to use Andre's words, what he told me was that he doesn't ever want to see a set of pedals returned to him. Once he sells them, never wants to see them again. So longevity and you know, reliability is obviously something that's really important in real life racing, and also equally as important in the world of sim racing. So high expectations there, definitely hoping that I won't be disappointed with longevity. Now, let's talk a little bit more about adjustment here, just while we are on the subject of the brake. As I was talking about before, one of the things I do love about these is the ease of adjustment here. So we do have that same screw on the front here, which allows us to adjust the angle of the brake. When we do make that adjustment though, it is going to be putting a little bit of preload on the hydraulic cylinder. So you do need to make a little additional adjustment here. So again, we're going to need to prop the pedals up so that we can tilt the cylinder. So all you need to do is just pop the clip up, pull the pin out, and that allows you to lift up the cylinder like so. Just going to prop that forward a little bit more so it's not banging into anything. Then we can adjust the angle of tilt to our preference. And you can see as we do that, the entire assembly is moving back, and you can actually see the little, what looks like copper insert here as well to reduce the amount of wear that we have on the moving parts, which is good to see. So again, we shouldn't require any maintenance on any of these things, maybe a little bit of PTFE grease or something like that occasionally just to stop any squeaks that might develop. But you know, so far just playing around with them on the table, haven't had any problems like that. Obviously, we'll let you know if we do. Again, remembering that these are pre-production, so that's something that we can feed back to them if we do have any issues. So we adjust the angle to our preference. And now what's happening is you can see when we push that back down, it's no longer lining up, and we don't want to maintain any preload on that hydraulic cylinder. So all we need to do is just, again, release our little retention screw here, wind in our fork until it lines up again. A little bit more. There we go, that's perfect. And then we grab this little guy again, slot it through, click it down, lock in our retaining nut, and we're good to go.